We like to think about small projects as projects with very particular constraints. That's what makes them small.
I think the small project holds this fascination for us. We're seeking out small projects where there's a client who wants something special, wants something personal. For us, Whitespace was our first commercial project. It started out as a waterproofing exercise. It's a carriage house from the 1800s in the back of a Victorian, we call it a mansion now, very large Victorian house built by one of the founders of Coca-Cola.
When we first encountered it, we were immediately struck with the presence of the history and the use of the space. So when we go see it, you'll see that there are scrawlings on the wall from the 1880s of when they changed the tires and when certain repairs were made, and there were test panels of paint put on the walls. And you could very easily see where the carriages had been stored because the brick was depressed, and you could see where the horses were stored. So it had a very tactile history to it. And what we were struck by in speaking with the owner, Susan Bridges, was that this space, because it was so strong in its material presence, could take a very precise intervention that could be very contemporary alongside of its material history. So the premise for the project was to find what was essential about what was there and leave it and respect it, and then introduce with the lightest touch and with the utmost care a method for presenting contemporary art.
Tried to create a mysterious pivoting wall which transforms the gallery from a termination to one that allows flow through.
You'll see that there are moments in the space where we've intentionally hidden our tracks, where, for example, Brian was mentioning that there's this very large wall, 14.5 feet long, that rotates on a pivot point. But we've covered the tracks about how it's structured, how we reinforce the entire building to accommodate that offset load. So the second project that we'll see, and this is one that we've just finished for, is the Caddell School of Building Construction on the campus of the Georgia Institute of Technology. It's a strange beginning for us because for some reason we've had many automotive buildings in our past. We've done an art gallery in a carriage house, and we've done a conservative Jewish synagogue in an old Chevy auto dealership building. And this too, as well as our office we're sitting in, was an automotive repair facility. But on the campus of Georgia Tech, the building that we started with was a motor pool building for an Army Navy Reserve training center. We removed everything down to the concrete and steel frame. We rebuilt an enclosure of a glazed curtain wall system, and then we shaded the entire building. So instead of an approach where we're simply reducing solar gain on a building with interior shading or exterior louvers, we actually put a superstructure over the entire building.
The building is very rectilinear and takes its cues from that, but the geometry of the shading device, we wanted it to be mechanics of sun direction and shading derive the form of the roof. Because there's a very important outdoor space or quad in front of this building, it now has a command of that location, which it never had. It kind of steps up among these larger buildings. The role of this canopy is not just to shade the building itself, but to shade the path in front of the building, because these paths that connect students to their buildings and to the campus. Further, with the louvers, we accentuated that, I believe, and there's a real mystery to how the light is filtering through this. Put the louvers and the shading device below the structure, so looking up, the structure is somewhat hidden by the element which bounces the light through.
This was not planned, but we actually have a louver right here. This is one of the extruded louvers for the Cadel building. And it's a teardrop curvilinear shape, and this gives it its strength. So it's mounted like this into a steel superstructure, and this allows drainage. But what happens is that when you get multiple louvers like this stacked up next to each other, so one here, and then the next one, and the next one, and you're getting sun hitting the interior of the neighboring louver, you get these very interesting double reflections. So you'll see when we walk underneath this canopy that there are moments when these louvers appear translucent. You swear that you're seeing the steel structure above, but you're not. What you're seeing is the lack of a reflection. So the light comes down, bounces here off this one and then underneath, and it gives the impression that these are glowing, but really what's happening is just a series of complex reflections. So that was an effect that came about strictly from a performance desire for rain and for shading, but it was something that was really joyful to discover. The Cadell building at Georgia Tech is a small project because it's a small building. It was a very small budget, but it had big aspirations. In a way, it's a small project that, again, which is a moment of leverage for us to be able to see over the horizon towards larger work, but work that is able to engage in the public realm.